Alright, here we go. Episode 49. Back with you again. It's me, Chucky, and we've got Jiggy.
Indeed, you do.
Mm-hmm. A beautiful lineup of movies tonight. Some really well-known movies. Except for one. Well, I don't know, maybe people do know it. But in any case, let the people out there know what's on today's menu.
Indeed, Manu is an appropriate word because first off we have the dinner party from 2020. Then we follow that up with RoboCop 2 from 1990. Then Silent Night, Deadly Night, the 1984 classic. Then we're going a bit more modern, like the dinner party, only this is more invisible because it's The Invisible Man, which came out in 2020. And we finish off with A Nightmare on Elm Street, Part 3 Dream Warriors from 1987, which is often considered one of the better sequels to the original classic. So, we start off tonight with the dinner party from 2020, in which case this couple comes to a dinner party. The husband is he's a playwright, and he wants to meet these influential people. Maybe they'll get his play a bit more money. He can do more.
He's a bit of an asshole too.
He is indeed.
He's not just a playwright.
Yeah.
He's also full-time asshole.
Yes, he is. His wife, who has a bit of a shaggy background, she had some troubling times as a child. Is sort of hesitant about this whole thing. They don't really know the people who invited them, but hey, when rich people invite you over to eat dinner with them, you have to go. So they went and things happen, and that's pretty much it. This is a movie I had never really heard about until I was going through and trying to decide which movies from 2020 I sort of wanted to see, and it sounded potentially interesting. It had like an okay rating on IMDb. It has at least over a 5. So I thought, hey, this might be okay, and I watched it, and it seems to me a very meandering movie. It takes a little while to get going. Like you listen to these rich people talk about plays and like operas and like all these fancy Italian pretentious pieces of shit. Like there's no way the common working guy can relate to any of this.
Yeah.
Like it was sort of interesting, but at the same time it's I'm like, what the hell am I listening to? So it's interesting, but it's also like almost a 2-hour movie. I think the movie's like an hour and 49 minutes, and then it's like 5 minutes of credits.
Yeah. Well, we were talking before the show, and you were, thinking you didn't expect RoboCop 2, which we're talking about later in the show. You didn't expect that to be 2 hours, and you thought, hey, it might be 80 minutes. Well, I tell you, this movie deserves to be 80 minutes.
Well, yeah, if not even shorter. And they certainly they do some things that are sort of interesting. At least I think they try, but there's a lot of things that go on in this movie past a certain point that I just don't much care for, like the route they went. I don't know, I feel like it maybe could have been done in a better way. Because it's not like the movie's particularly cheap looking. It has an okay production behind it, but it's just way too meandering and slow. And when things actually pick up, I don't really think the route they went was particularly great.
Well, it's funny, a lot of the points that you just made are exactly what I've written down here.
We are basically the same people.
Yeah, like I've mentioned the movie being 2 hours long, which is ridiculous because it takes pretty much a whole hour for anything interesting to actually happen. It's just talking, and like you said, they're talking about shit that the regular person probably has no interest in. It's a dinner party for posh, artsy folk, the type that sip wine and drink macchiatos and shit like that. I had a macchiato once and it was terrible.
So out of interest, what's your favorite play?
I don't even know any play. Just
Yeah.
throw out anything.
Like when each of them were going and talking about like the favorite operas and arguing about it, like, who are these people?
The worst play I've ever seen is probably also the best play I've ever seen. But characters are written as quirky, but they're just obnoxious douchebags, really. I mean, they're the type of people I would never want to have a conversation with. I was just hoping, like, throughout, or at least during all the boring parts of the movie, which is essentially the first hour, there's a few women in the movie, and one in particular, Sadie, who I'm thinking, come on, spice it up, get those titties out or something, please. And later she does, but unfortunately, one of my pet peeves with nudity is people having tattoos on their titties. Why did they have to do that? That just ruined that part of the movie for me. That's the one thing that was potentially going to not save the movie, but at least, maybe notch it up a rating for me. And they ruined it.
At least you got the black actress's nudity in the beginning, so.
She wasn't my type. But, and I assume that tattoo is fake. I assume the real actress does not have that tattoo, so, if it was any other movie she was in, probably would have been fine. But, one of the other things that you mentioned, production value, that's another point I had. It actually looks like a good movie, like if you're just looking at it. You can see it's a pretty professionally made movie. It's not like all these random people who have never made a movie before got together and tried to make something. So it's just a boring-ass movie for the most part. Now, the second half, yes, things pick up. There's a lot of stuff going on. The second half isn't great, but at least it's, watchable. There's something to see. But yeah, because it took so long to get to that, I think that first hour really tainted a lot of the stuff that happens in the second half.
So have you ever engaged in sexual relations with a corpse before?
No.
I was wondering if you're thinking about it or just... Okay. And
I got blasted recently online for a comment I made. Who was it? Is Tanya Roberts? She had died. There's one movie discussion group on Facebook that I was in, or I was still in it, but they did a post where they showed a bunch of pictures of her from movies, and she was an actress who was really sexualized a lot in her movies because she's a good-looking woman with good figure and things like that. And so I made a comment about her figure, and then I had a couple of people jump on me for it, and I was like, hey, it's a compliment. And they're like, oh, you want to fuck a corpse or something? I'm like, Jesus Christ, they're talking about me and how my brain works. Like, why would you talk about how good looking she is when she's just died, and now you're the ones talking about me fucking a corpse? I mean, I think there's something more wrong with how your brain is working than how mine is working. But anyways, I just thought I'd bring that up just because it was to do with banging corpses, I guess.
Indeed, and speaking of other taboos that you may or may not want to engage in, you probably shouldn't. I've seen this movie. The little I knew about it, I've heard this movie called like a quote-unquote cannibal movie, which, yeah, cannibalism comes up for like maybe a minute and a half, and that's pretty much it. Like, there's a scene in which there's a few people engaged in such actions, but it's like extraordinarily tame to the point of it doesn't really, I don't know, to me it doesn't really have much of an impact. I didn't care at that point because, like Chucky said, it takes so long to get there that even once things start happening, like, you're so out of it that it's really hard to pull you back in. So even once things got a little more interesting, it just, like, it really is a thing too little too late.
Yeah. Because there's so much talking for that first hour, I mean, you really need some strong characters if you really want to pull off, like, that type of movie. And unfortunately, most of the characters in this movie are just either annoying or just unbearable with their personalities. It's just, yeah. I mean, outside of maybe Sadie and the lead actress, who sort of watchable, everyone else in the movie just really pissed me off. I mean, at least, spoiler alert, probably the two best characters in the movie. Best is a strong word. just not the worst characters in the movie. They're the ones who actually end up surviving.
Yeah, and I feel like another issue is like this, like all these characters, but I feel like we never, even with the movie long and focusing primarily on conversation, we never really learn a lot about why they do this. I guess it's maybe quote unquote some hints thrown in, and one like these rich people like sort of betrays the others. I don't know why. Honestly, I have no idea. She seemed like she was into it, and then boom, betrayal. Like I don't know why. So I don't know. I feel like it's not enough actual character depth here. Like they can talk about like these fancy plays and operas as much as they want, but I don't know who these people are.
Yeah. I wouldn't expect much from whoever made this movie because they thought they were writing these quirky, artsy type scenes, and they probably think, oh yeah, let's give it an ending that has everyone guessing, and it just ends up being what the fuck, why the fuck were they doing all this shit? And we don't know, and we don't really care, to be honest.
That's true. And I also wanted to mention, it's possible that the main cop in the movie, the guy is a bit of a dick. How do you feel about him?
Yeah, he's a dick. I mean, I was glad to see him get shot in the head.
I sort of like him making his wife, hey, you should promise the king. like who is this guy? So yeah, the dinner party is a movie I didn't know that much about going into. After seeing it, I'm like really surprised it has over a 5 on IMDb, and it's not like it's only like 60, 70 people. It's like almost 3,000 people rated this, and it's over a 5.6 right now. So I don't know. I guess maybe it's a situation that I'm just not seeing what these other people have seen. I mean, there's some interesting things here potentially. Like the whole idea, like, hey, they have to get this couple, and then they do sort of like a ritualistic, you know, not sort of like emotional torture type thing, but they even screwed it up, and I don't know, it just left very little impact on me. I didn't enjoy this whatsoever, and the length, almost a 2-hour movie, made it so much worse. So I'm giving this one a 4 out of 10.
Great minds think alike. Yeah, I'm giving this one a 4 as well. The first half was boring as fuck, and the second half picked up, but at that point you didn't care so much. But yeah, no, it's a movie that kind of looks good, but yeah, it's just written by, I don't know, some pretentious assholes, I guess. I mean, they had the right idea by getting some titties out, but they even managed to botch that. And shame on them. Well, nuke me baby, we're going on to RoboCop 2 from 1990. RoboCop is back, and this time he's fighting his own sequel. Another monster cyborg. One that's kind of less retarded than Ed 209. But because of the name of this machine, it's actually called RoboCop 2, so... and there's, some corrupt political shit going on in the background too, which I'm sure Jiggy appreciated.
Well, actually, I have a lot to talk about when it comes to that. But...
yeah, but I don't know the exact filming dates or anything, but obviously this movie is listed as being released in 1990, so it's considered a 90s movie, and yeah, it does kind of feel like a 90s movie. To a point. Like, if you compare RoboCop 1 and 2 side by side, they do feel different. They don't quite, it feels like more than just a few years between them. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. I actually really like this movie. I'm not saying it's better than the first, but I still enjoy it about as much as the first. And that's probably a lot more to do with the fact that, I watched this and the first one just a lot when I was young, like 8 years old, give or take, something like that. It's a little different from the first, but I feel like this movie's cool, man. It's got, like, one of the best stop-motion fight sequences that I've ever seen in a movie. Back then, you didn't have all your CGI and all that. You had to do your effects all practically, and, I'm not saying it's seamless or anything, but I think it still holds up pretty well to this day for a movie that's, 30 years old. anyways, I'll talk more about it, but I know this is a first time watch for you. Obviously, you've seen the first movie, I don't know how many times, but yeah, let me know how your first time viewing of RoboCop 2 was.
Yeah, so I didn't have necessarily high expectations for this one, mainly because anytime you have a pretty good movie and it gets a sequel, half the time it's not going to be that great. This movie I think was okay. I don't think it was anywhere. I don't know. It had a lot of interesting ideas, some concepts in the movie, which I thought if they had focused in on those a little more, I probably would have enjoyed it a bit more. It's certainly not a bad movie though. A lot of quality action scenes. I will say that fight toward the end, the stop motion fight, like it sort of, to me it felt like it was dragging on a bit. Like, I mean, it looked cool sort of, but then other times it looked a bit janky. But I mean, it's not like it's movies from the time period it's from, so I don't necessarily blame it. But I don't know. I was just reminded of like some of the less enjoyable parts from the Terminator movie, just all this shooting and fighting and stuff. It's like, it just gets old after a little. But what really brings this movie together is the main, I guess, story idea of this private company trying to sort of take ownership of the city of Detroit, which is a very it's interesting because obviously the idea is that, hey, they're a private company, they can run Detroit better than it's currently being run. They have the mayor here, who seems somewhat ineffective, and he's trying his best to sort of help the people. But then what's really interesting is he tries to make this deal with this kid. Kid's basically saying, hey, if you stop coming after this drug, there won't be any more crime, and you'll save the city. And he's going to give like the mayor I think it's $50 million. So hey, legalize drugs, get a public ownership of city. That seems okay to me. Which actually, I think in the movie it was sort of portrayed as like a negative thing, but honestly, the idea that, I don't know, I always thought if somebody wants to do drugs, just let them do it. It's none of my business what they're doing. So, I mean, I would have taken the deal in a heartbeat. Like, if I could, like, get this, private company off my ass to actually, keep the city, that would have been nice. Because when I think about the idea of a private corporation owning a city, like, talk about dangerous. Yeah, but that's just me.
I don't remember which country it was, or there's some country out there trying to legalize heroin.
Yeah, see, I'll be honest, I don't mind that. It's probably not it's not like the most pressing issue I can think of. There's a lot more important things we should deal with. But if somebody wants to do it, it's not my business. Like, just do it solid to like kids and do what you want.
Yeah, but anyways, this this movie tries to have a bit more fun, I think. You still got the crazy TV commercials that we were seeing in the first movie, and they're always enjoyable. It took 2 days to download Specs from Cleveland. Blows his brains out.
That's my favorite one. Love
yeah.
It.
And then, Sunblock 5000. Just apply a pint. And you're good for hours.
And then it gives you skin cancer.
Yeah,
too.
Gives you cancer. I mean, she only put on like 3 thick layers of it. And there's other things like, the demonstrations of the beta versions of RoboCop 2. They were silly fun. Like, the cyborgs, they kept failing. One just completely takes its head off and screams, and it's silly, but funny. I love the mayor. Fuck you, you senile old bastard. He's just got this short fuse, I guess. Even when he's talking to the media, like, oh yes, we're going to look into this, and then as soon as he stops talking and asking a few questions, he's like, I said no command. I love that guy.
Yeah, he had that sort of familiar face, but I'm just looking through his credits and I don't think I recognize him from anything. So, I mean, that was probably one of my favorite performances in that movie.
In fact, talking about silly things, like there's a moment in the movie where they RoboCop 2 gets... Oh, sorry, RoboCop, he gets destroyed, and they're questioning whether it's worth putting him back together or not, and they end up doing it, but they end up giving him like hundreds of new directives, and they're coming up with what directives do we give him, and the guy's like, oh, he should address environmental issues.
Yeah, so that's actually, I might bring up, that's sort of interesting, because I actually don't disagree that they should probably add a bit more. I guess it's not like he was terrible before, but giving like an extra thing, hey, I guess here's always been my sort of main issue with the idea of RoboCop. Like, if you see a crime and you stop it, that's fine, but I feel like it's also important to note why the crime's happening. Like, if somebody's robbing something and you stop the robbery, that's great, but then you have to ask, okay, why are they robbing stuff? And if it has to do with like economic issues, like, you can't fix it by just stopping the robbery. So I think there's a point to be made that it should maybe have a sort of a wider focus, but at the same time, I'm pretty sure they don't need RoboCop talking about environmental issues, because that's probably not going to help.
There is a quick moment where they show some of these directives scrolling on a television screen or a monitor, whatever. And I didn't get a good look at them, but I did see one of them, and one of these directives says, "If you haven't got anything nice to say, don't talk." That's funny. I mean, that's going a bit far, but
yeah, I'm actually surprised they went that direction, like trying to, I guess, appeal to. I'm not even sure, like appeal to like the parents and stuff, and I don't know, just like that scene. It was sort of funny, but it just felt a bit, I don't know, sort of after me, especially since like it lasted for like, like that one scene, and then he electrocutes himself, and boom, he's okay again. So I don't know, it was sort of amusing, but at the same time, I feel like there wasn't enough to it.
Yeah. Well, I don't have too much else to say other than that. I typically enjoy Tom Noonan in movies. He's got an interesting character in this one, bit of a. He's not just your typical drug lord. He's, this guy with this god complex, and he's an interesting character. So a little unusual. Not, like I said, not your typical bad guy. Like, obviously he's bad, but he's more about, just give the people what they want. I think also the idea that, they had they were talking about why their prototypes weren't working, the brains they were choosing for these things. She's of the mindset, you got to get someone who's going to embrace the immortality or this new body, and I don't know. It's just an interesting thing to think about.
And that actually reminds me, I feel like there's sort of like almost a philosophical idea this movie is, like sort of pointing that toward the beginning. Like they're asking him, hey, who are you? Are you RoboCop, or are you this, the guy that RoboCop is based, his body was used for? And obviously it's not like he's completely without memory or emotion. So it's sort of like an idea like, hey, is this guy, quote unquote human, or is he just a machine? I don't think they did enough with that to make it really like a focus. I mean, like, even toward the end when something happens to like the kid character, it's not like, I don't know, it's not like he went after the robot just because of what happened to the kid. He's going to go after that robot guy anyway. So, I don't know, I feel like could have done a little more with it, but at the same time, they already had like a bunch of things in this movie. Like they had the whole police union protest, which I thought was another interesting idea. And I think it's also so funny that RoboCop was also a union buster, so well done. So I can understand why they maybe did want to focus too much on the philosophical idea, but it was sort of interesting, especially like we said with the one female doctor talking about the type of mentality that would best be used for this type of program.
I do have one thought as to why those prototypes were failing. Maybe it's because they realize they no longer have a dick. Because there's this one scene in the movie where, it's when they've got RoboCop on life support, and there's this gigantic thing that pops out of his arm that says, I don't know what it says, like danger or warning or critical or something. But the thing that pops out is like just as big as his arm, if not bigger. Like, I'm thinking they could give him like a penis that pops out, because this guy is like stalking his ex-wife, and even if he got back together with her, he couldn't bang. Like, you think RoboCop would like to fuck?
Well, I do think that if you want to see a movie that examines what really makes somebody a human being or not, you should watch iRobot.
Cyborg G. No, wait.
See, I feel like that might be a movie that we should not watch.
Hey, it's giving me ideas. I should write a movie.
Yeah, I guess if you have to write a movie, we can definitely talk about it.
We'll get funding for it.
Indeed. I trust you.
Yeah, so like I said, this is like a movie that I watched heaps of times when I was little, so... Well, I think, when you're that young, and yeah, I mean, I grew up starting watching movies around, I'd say around 1990, I would say, is where I really started watching horror movies. So, pretty much everything I watched was in the 80s, which, is a golden decade. And when you're that young, I feel like it's hard to really be bored by too much. Like, you're watching a horror movie because horror's cool. It doesn't even really matter what it is, or an action movie. I mean, obviously there's some different levels to it, but if you're watching all the big name movies, it's hard to really have a boring time. So everything is awesome. Well, not everything, but quite a bit. And this was awesome to me when I first watched it, and that nostalgic aspect of it carries over and still helps it to this day. 9 out of 10. There you go.
Yeah, I think it's a decent movie. It has a lot of ideas going through it. I really think the whole political aspect was really interesting, because it's not like the mayor was necessarily a great character. He's willing to make a deal with these bunch of criminals, and there's no doubt there's corruption in the Detroit politics. There's corruption in almost any politics. So I mean, I'm not sure if I were to call it as big as like a battle of ideas. Private corporate ownership of a city versus just a governmental elected official. Speaking of which, I did like the idea that, hey, anybody can get stocks, and that's how you can help have ownership of the city. And like one guy, like, well, not everybody can buy stocks. We can't afford it. So yeah, interesting political ideas. The action was pretty good throughout. I just wasn't as, I guess, moved by this one as I was with the first movie. So I'm just going to give this a 7 out of 10, which is my average rating. I didn't have a bad time with it. I don't know. I was hoping for a little bit more, but overall it wasn't like a bad experience. So I think a 7 out of 10 seems pretty fair.
Well, at least you didn't have to watch RoboCop 3 for this show.
Oh boy, it has good tidings.
Yeah. Well, I think what's it got on IMDb? Something like a 4 out of 10.
Well, that can't be too bad then.
It's not great. Well, this one actually only has like a 5.8 or something, which I think is a bit low, but anyways. Actually, one other thing, that old man who runs OCP, I remember in the first movie, someone calling him a sweet old man who means well. Yeah, he doesn't seem that sweet in this movie. Anyways.
And it's funny, actually, one more thing sort of related to that. Like, the very end of this movie was, like, so corny. It's like, we can stop him, no, we can touch him, well, we're only human. It's like, oh god. It's just like one of those, like, cheesy, like, one-liners to finish out the movie, which, fine, I get it, it's fun, but I'll admit I sort of, like, groaned a little, like, oh god, that's how they end it. But speaking of Christmas, this next movie takes place in Utah, which doesn't have anything to do with Christmas, but it does for this movie, which is Silent Night, Deadly Night from 1984, which is a bit of a probably a cult classic, in which a kid witnesses the murder of his parents, and he's sort of messed up. He goes to this orphanage with his brother, and he just gets messed up more because, well, it's an orphanage, Catholic orphanage, and these like Catholic people are like, hey, punishment is good, and this messed up type of stuff. So this kid is really messed up. Then he starts working at like this toy store. I think he was 18 or so. And then like over the course, he sort of snaps as soon as he's like asked to, hey, you have to dress up as Santa Claus. And since he saw this Santa Claus guy kill his parents, every time he sees Santa Claus, it's like gets out of this bad feelings and stuff. So yeah, he snaps, he goes on a rampage, kills people, and things happen. So I mentioned this to Jackie before the show, and I just want to mention it now. I have seen this movie once before, but the circumstances in which I watched it, it was done in October when I was watching a bunch of movies, so I didn't necessarily remember a whole lot about this. So it's sort of interesting. I was actually pretty excited about coming back to see this one again, and I think it's a decently enjoyable movie. At times it feels like it's a bit, I don't know, shallow might be the right word, because like he kills a lot of the people he kills early on are the people he knows. So then like the rest is just like a random, like going to a house and these random characters are like killing these kids randomly out in the wards. So it doesn't really have a, I don't know, it doesn't really
Well,
have a big,
that's just while he's on his way back to the orphanage.
yeah, which is fine. But I just wish he would have been able to kill that last one he was aiming for. So close.
Oh yeah.
And actually, I think the finale was pretty interesting, which I'm going to touch on in a bit later. But I think it's a pretty enjoyable movie. It's not like it's not like the first killer Santa Claus movie. I mean, there's like movies that predated it, such as God, what was it called? That movie from 1980 that I can't remember the name of. It will come to me. But it is probably one of the most memorable because I remember when this was released, there's a bunch of controversy surrounding it. So it's a pretty decent movie. It's not like it's like necessarily a fantastic movie, but it's pretty okay. So I'm sort of curious. When did you first see this one?
I don't know exactly what year. I first saw it when I was probably in my early 20s, which was about 15 years ago. And yeah, I actually enjoy this movie. I think it's one of my go-to Christmas movies. I don't have like a regular list of movies that I watch at Christmas, but this is a movie that would definitely be on it if I did have one. There's a lot to this movie that I actually do enjoy. The shallow aspect of it it's not a big deal. I mean, at the end of the day, slasher movies are people going around killing people. They're just random people that they don't know. So, and I think this one there's some depth to it. There's reasons. Well, I mean, it's interesting to see a guy who becomes this monstrous maniac just based on traumatic experience. Throughout the movie, they actually show that he's struggling to deal with these things that pop up. Having to deal with Christmas and the scenes where he kind of catches some people having sex, and because his mother was murdered by Santa while being raped. So yeah, there's a bit to it. I guess I just go from my points from the beginning of the movie through to the end, but I mean, I do enjoy that the movie just starts off straight away with the title. It's got this girl singing in the background, and then the music blares, and I think the music in the movie is actually quite unrelenting, which is pretty good. It adds to the dread of the film. By the way, there's like a crazy grandpa in this movie, and I'll just say, like, for crazy characters, people often bring up, I don't know, like Friday the 13th, you got Crazy Ralph, but to me, Crazy Grandpa's better. You better run for your life.
Yeah, it's funny because that's just so random. And at the same time, I sort of appreciated how the parents are like, "Why would our son lie about this?" And like, "Well, this old son of a bitch." Like, so I did find that amusing. I'm also sort of amused by the fact that the father's just sort of trolling the son. Like, "Hey, I'm just going to pretend to cut hair, talk to you." Like, what a dick. Like,
Yeah, but there's I mean, I can kind of see why there were so many people offended at the time of the release of this movie. I mean, a lot of it's still to do with the fact that, it's Christmas and it's meant to be, you're portraying Santa, which is something that a lot of kids get excited about, and you're portraying him as this murderer. But I mean, there are times in this movie where it's just like, to me, I'm fine with it, but I can see how other people see it as unnecessary. Like, they go a bit far in certain scenes. Like, even just the opening death in the movie, which is, I think, the one where the store clerk gets shot. He gets shot once, and then he kind of gets back up to shoot again, and the Santa shoots him again. Like, both in the torso or somewhere in that region. And it looks like, okay, the store clerk, he's done. He looks dead. But then they go the extra mile and shoot him in the fucking head.
Yeah.
It's like, you didn't really need to do that. I mean, I appreciate it, but I guess the person who isn't into horror movies and things like that, they're going to see that as a bit much. And then a couple minutes later, he's out there raping and killing more. And there's other kills in the movie where they probably do that too. But speaking of that, if you're not watching the unrated version of this movie, you're missing out on quite a bit of stuff. So I presumed you watched the unrated version.
Yeah, and the reason I'm pretty sure I did, because the camera quality changed between scenes, which, I sort of enjoy that. It's like the My Bloody Valentine version that I'm most used to watching does the same thing, so some quality scenes there.
Yeah, I actually had that point in here referencing My Bloody Valentine. Yeah, it's definitely like that. It's just one of those movies that's just completely so much better if you get to see all the extra parts that were cut out. I think the other interesting aspect to this movie is just the orphanage and how he's raised there. You got this Mother Superior character who's got this method. She talks about how punishment's necessary and all this kind of stuff, and she really, the kid already got told by the grandpa and whoever else, Santa punishes naughty kids, and he comes after you, and then she's talking about punishment. It just all kind of builds and builds till, he does punish.
Yeah, it's funny because what those kids probably needed, Billy and his brother needed, well, I guess the brother was baby at the time, but what Billy needed more than anything was probably therapy. And that's probably what a lot of these kids, after being raised in this type of, environment, like, obviously there's nothing wrong with being in an orphanage, but like, I'm always sort of hesitant about religious institutions like this, because I mean, there's the way, and I know this is a movie and it's probably more extreme, but the whole way, like, just tying that kid down to the bar, just like, I mean, come on. There has to be some type of limitation.
Yeah, so just speaking about that scene, I couldn't stop thinking about when he gets tied to the bed and they just leave him there to sleep like that. I couldn't stop thinking about how he's just gonna piss and shit all throughout those sheets.
Yeah, and he'll probably be blamed for that too.
Yeah.
And the scene that really, I wouldn't say got to me, but it just furthered my annoyance. It's like when one of the nicer sisters like says, "Hey, you should come out and play," and she sort of coaxes him out, and he goes outside, and then the Mother Superior, after something else happens, sort of like finds him, like, then punishes him for leaving the room. I'm like, oh, come on, like, have some type of decency. But I mean, being raised Catholic myself, I can say that Catholics have no decency, so it's okay.
That little kid packs one hell of a punch, by the way.
Yeah, that scene was probably my top 5 favorite scenes. And actually, that brings up to another point. And before I make this point, I just want to quickly say, the movie I was trying to reference earlier was To All a Good Night from 1980. And there's also Christmas Evil from 1980, both of which had killer Santa Clauses.
But they didn't have hairy butt cheeks.
Well, that may be true. So there's actually 2 things I wanted to mention. One, this is an absolutely ridiculous scene in this movie, and I think if you've seen the movie, we all know the scene. But it's barely after he gets his job, just just walking around this toy store, like doing all these nice things. Like he punches out the time clock, but then he straightens out straightens out something that's crooked, and you just see his manager behind him smiling and nodding his head, like to this cheesy song in the background. There's the funniest 2.5 minutes I've ever seen in my life. It's just glorious.
Speaking of this, I don't know how long ago it was, probably well over 10 years ago, when I was kind of first using YouTube, I uploaded some of these Mentos commercials. And like for anyone who grew up back in I don't know exactly when it was, late 80s, early 90s, but they always had these commercials on TV, and they'd have this stupid Mentos song playing in the background. They get into this like annoying situation. They eat one of these Mentos candies or whatever, and then suddenly everything's all good, or And anyways, I did one for Silent Night, Deadly Night, and it is actually on our YouTube channel, but it's like really old. It's like recorded with a potato. 120p or whatever. I don't know. But what I plan to do is remake that commercial, because I think it's the funniest one out of the ones I've done. It's mainly because it's so simple, and just a little nodding at the end when he straightens up the little book on the stand. For anyone who's familiar with those commercials, I felt it was beautiful. And in fact, I'm gonna remake it, and I'm gonna attach it to this review. So stay till the end, and you'll get to see it.
Yeah. So that scene. I know it's an often talked about little montage, but that scene just really cracked me up. I had a fantastic time with that. I even, like, after I saw the movie again, I posted that scene on my Facebook. Like, that's a fantastic scene. And this is a smaller thing, but once so like Billy catches these two co-workers
fucking.
Yeah, one of the guys, it seems to me, and maybe it's I don't know, it seems to me he's raping the woman.
Yeah.
Yeah, I honestly can't tell if it's like just sexual assault or I mean, it's obviously attempted rape, but I'm not sure if he's actually raping her. So then Bailey he has this sort of funny thing which says naughty and then attacks somebody. And he does it throughout, and it's pretty funny. But to be honest, I at that time I didn't know if he was going to be going after the guy or the girl, mainly because I thought he might connect any sexual thing negatively, so I thought he could have gone after either one. But he goes after the guy and sort of, in my opinion, saves her. And then,
yeah.
I mean, I get, like, oh my god, you just murdered this guy, you're crazy, but at the same time...
Could have thanked him.
Yeah, the guy was attempting to rape her, so, I mean, some type of perspective might have been nice. I mean, I know, that's just me.
Yeah, I had that exact same point down too, about how he really does save her from being raped. We understand, you just killed the guy, but it's not like you cut his head off or anything. You were just kind of like choking him, but and choked him a little too much. But
yeah, I mean, and there's some situations in which you have to protect. I mean, he wants to protect himself. He's protecting somebody else. But even so, like, I feel like in like just say a lot of Joey cases, I feel like a lot of Joeys would look at it and say, well, I think he wasn't doing like necessarily the right thing, but you can't really blame him for what he did. And then of course he goes a bit overboard with his next actions. Speaking of which, the whole sequence in the toy store is pretty fun throughout, mainly because I really like the I don't know what the actor's name is, but the guy who owns the store, he's like drunken.
Let's get shit faced.
Yeah, that scene. I mean, that's probably the nicest boss I've ever seen. By the way, I mean, like if I had a boss like that, I would actually enjoy work. But so that whole scene, like the after hours party, that was so fun. So I mean, this movie has a lot of fun in it, and I really enjoyed seeing it again. It's not perfect, and actually, one more thing, I thought it was really interesting, the finale at the orphanage. Like, you would expect, it's a horror movie, you would expect it to take place at night or something, but it's just like in the middle of the day, which I think, it felt, I would say, more real, but it did have a little different feel to it than you might see in most movies, so I really appreciated that.
Yeah, the pacing to this movie is pretty good. The kills just keep on coming, really. I mean, the outside of maybe a little bit of a build up to him becoming this maniac. I mean, it's from a slasher aspect of just seeing some cool kills and all that. It's just every however many minutes go by, you get another kill, and I don't know. I think it works pretty well.
Yeah, and this is a scene in which, like you mentioned, he catches these two people having sex on like a pool table, or trying to.
Two balls in the corner pocket. Yeah.
Yeah. So I noticed her name was in the credits, but I didn't know who she played. But the girl in that scene was Lena Quigley. We've spoken a few times about her in the past, and she never really makes an impression on me. She's like a fine actress, I guess, but I never really knew I liked her until I actually saw this movie. I mean, she could open the door topless to me anytime.
She's too skinny for me. I'm not a fan of so skinny. You can see the bones in their body, and I don't know. Too skinny for me.
Yeah, to each their own. I'll just keep it for myself. But
yeah, you can have her. You can.
And I feel like a lot of those kids at the end of the movie might need therapy, and they're probably not going to get it from the orphanage. So I feel bad for all of them. Although and I saw it coming, just the way they're sort of building up to it. But the final scene was just that cracked me up. The little brother's reaction. And I think I've not seen any of the sequels, but I'm guessing the second movie sort of continues or tries to play after that. So
the second movie is actually, it's like half new scenes and half scenes from the original. It's I think the main character is like the other brother. Just one other thing I was gonna mention is, just because earlier I was talking about how there's a certain level of dread to this movie, and towards the end there's a Santa that gets shot. They think is the killer, but isn't the killer, because he's visiting the orphanage, and I think they said it's Father O'Brien or something like that, but they have to add that extra level. He's deaf. He wouldn't have heard you to stop. So poor guy just gets blasted because he's deaf.
I also love the generic Catholic priest, Father O'Brien, because of course he's Irish. Yeah. So I mean, and that guy was probably a pretty nice guy. I mean, he's a deaf guy who's coming over to be Santa Claus for orphans. So, and I do sort of think it's funny. I didn't like the Mother Superior character, but I sort of like her going after the cop. Not that I necessarily agree with her, but I don't like I don't like Mother Superior, but at least she, in her own way, cares about the kids' safety. So I appreciated that. I still wish she would have died though.
Yeah. That's just one thing I wish we got to see. But anyways, well, I mean, they've gone so far already with all this extra violence. I mean, why not just axe a old handicapped nun? So,
yeah,
you might as well.
that would give them the people something to really be unhappy about. Yeah, so it's a pretty good movie. I was really happy to see it again. And there's a lot of great kills. I personally like the one this person gets decapitated while sliding. We don't actually see the decapitation, but we see the headless body, and then the head come flying down.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and there's also a scene where this woman gets sort of pushed onto some antlers, and that's pretty good too. And can't go without saying I love the archery scene. I mean, it's pretty simple, just this person gets shot with an arrow, but hey, I liked it.
You love your archery deaths in movies.
I just wish there's more of a focus and more movies on them. Because when they're done well, they can be pretty cool. Admittedly, there's only so much you can do with a bow and arrow. But, so variety is the spice of life, as they say. So this movie is pretty good. I had a pretty good time with it. It's not an amazing movie, but it is a movie I was really happy to see again. And I can definitely see this being like sort of like a top 10 Christmas horror movie. So I'm giving this one right now, and this may change. It's sort of like a rating on the fly, but I'm giving this one an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm giving the exact same score, 8 out of 10. I enjoy watching this movie. it's not something I could watch on a yearly basis, but well, I mean, I could, but I don't intend to. Uh, well, I mean, Christmas makes it a bit easier to, hey, just put on Christmas horror movies. So I guess, you kind of have a reason if you want to. But yeah, I still enjoy watching this movie. I think it's got a certain level of dread, as I've been saying, to the film that I think a lot of other movies don't quite have as much as this one. And I mean, at least comparing to other slasher movies. But all the people that were offended by this movie, it just makes you kind of want to love it just that little bit more.
Yeah.
I mean, there's even a nice little touching moment in the movie where he gives a knife to a little girl and smiles about it. So
I sort of wish he had some type of actual gift for her, but I get it. He just can't see anybody as innocent.
Yeah, I mean, he did work at a toy store. Maybe have like a Barbie doll in his pocket or something. So next up we've got The Invisible Man from 2020. I don't know if this is exactly a remake because I haven't seen any of these older movies. I think there's one from the 30s and from the 80s. I'm sure you have, so maybe you can let us know if this is a remake or just like another version or whatever.
I mean, I'd say, remake, I think it's probably fine. I mean, the original The Invisible Man came out in 1933, and it's like a 72-minute movie. It's a pretty short movie. A lot of the Universal classics were back then, Dracula, Frankenstein. So this obviously, like most remakes add a bit more. So this adds a little more. So I think it's fine calling it a remake. There are some differences I sort of want to point out later on, but I think calling it a remake's pretty fair.
I'm sure some of the plot details a bit different, but yeah, in any case, it's got the same title as these other movies, so I guess we can go with that. But essentially, this woman who escapes from her abusive partner, Adrian, and she attempts to move on with her life. She can barely go outside without freaking out, and as she slowly improves, she finds out that Adrian supposedly committed suicide, so he's dead now, and she doesn't have to worry about, leaving the house and being attacked by him. But obviously, it's being that this is called The Invisible Man, we can expect that, he's not dead. And it just ends up being an elaborate plot to stalk her, and, he's wearing this invisible suit that he developed because, he's like really good at sciencey shit. I don't know. And he wants a baby and all this other shit. I mean, there's stuff to this, but as I was saying before the show, this is the last movie I watched before the cinemas shut down from COVID. I watched it in Gold Class. Gold Class here is, where you can... They bring you food and all this kind of stuff while you watch your movie, and you get to lay back in comfy chairs and stuff like that. So I don't know if it was that experience that made it a little easier to get through the movie. I'm not saying that I had a hard time getting through it on the second attempt, but I did feel it felt a little slower than when I first saw it. I don't know if that's a cinema effect or what, but or maybe it's also just the fact I've seen it before, so I'm just, the suspenseful parts of it, they lose a little bit of its oomph because you kind of know what's coming, and you know what it's building up to, so you kind of just want to get to the stuff that it's building up to. But I think this is still an enjoyable movie. I think the suit idea is pretty cool, and to be honest, with all the advancements we've had over the past few decades, somewhat realistic at this point in time. So yeah, I think it's an enjoyable movie, but it's it's not fantastic. It does have still some issues, but anyways, what did you think of this one?
Yeah, so this is one that I've been interested in seeing since I saw the trailer for it. It's a decent movie. I prefer the 33 movie more just because, talk about classic scenes and actors in the original. This one's fine. I do want to say the main actress, Elizabeth Mouse, is an actress I know from a American TV show called The West Wing. She appeared in like.
No, you watch Mad Men.
Well, I've actually never seen Mad Men, but it's probably a
Well,
good show.
it does have Christina Big Titties Hendricks.
Yes, but in this movie you have Elizabeth Moss, and I think she does pretty good. She's with a clearly abusive guy. I wish we would have seen. We never really see him before she breaks away, so we don't really see exactly how bad he actually is. We sort of just hear about it afterwards, in sort of vague terms, which I think sort of in a way it sort of increases like, oh my god, I'm so afraid of this guy. So I really like her performance. I think it's really interesting they went with the whole like almost like psychological aspect, like up into a certain point it could be theoretically could be that she's just sort of losing it and she just thinks he's around even though he may not be. And this is another character in the movie who brings that idea up, and as soon as it's brought up, it's like, oh well, we know it's probably not going to be that. So it was an interesting sort of psychological look at it. I think the suit it looks cool, but I'll be honest and just say sort of like I guess nowadays the way the original movie did it would be too almost awkward. He had a serum that made him invisible and he'd just walk around naked.
It's more like
so
a Hollow Man type thing.
Yeah. So I can imagine nowadays it might be like, oh, there's an invisible naked guy in the room with a I don't know how old the daughter of the cop was, but I can see how that might be challenging. But I don't know. I didn't like love the suit idea mainly because as soon as it started, I'm like, oh god, it's a sci-fi movie now. And this it's not it's still a horror movie, but it just felt a bit futuristic-ish. I mean, technology has come a long way. I'm not sure if it's come quite that far, but I don't know the movie's interesting. It makes some interesting choices. Like the main character has a sister, and I was really shocked when something happens to the sister. I didn't see it coming because it was invisible. So that was interesting. And also this sort of later on in the movie where Elizabeth Moss's character is spending time in like a mental institution type thing. Luckily, a lot of what she is saying that got her there is vindicated toward the end because they actually see this guy in the suit and there's a lot of witnesses. So I'm really happy they brought that up. I don't know. I'm also not like extraordinarily wowed by the ending. Not that any of these criticisms are like, I don't know. The movie's still a decent movie. I had an okay time with it. I was never particularly bored with it, but it just I wish there was I wish they had either gone a different direction or done things a bit differently because it wasn't like I was hoping for like a B plus movie and I didn't really get that. I mean it's an okay movie. It's just not a great movie.
I think I was just more upset that he ended up ruining a pretty good breakfast.
Yeah. Talk about a very small, but I mean, diggish move. Like just, I mean, it was still a great looking breakfast. It was okay. I would have eaten that and had an okay time with it. And I do like the way they shot that scene though. Just focusing on the kitchen and I can only imagine in cinemas you're sitting back and trying to see what's happening, and then you slowly see the flame being moved up. So that was fun.
Yeah, well, the opening sequences or sequence to this movie, along with the title, the water washing up, showing all the credits and stuff, that was so dark to see while watching it last night. I don't know. Did you feel like? Did you struggle to read what it was like the credits and?
I did struggle to read it. I thought it was a pretty, I don't want to say innovative. I thought it was pretty interesting the way they did that. I'm not sure if it's necessary, but I don't know. I can see what you're saying.
But anyways, the restaurant kill. I mean, that was pretty unexpected. That was kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, talk about. I mean, it's now. I will say I was sort of annoyed at the sister. Like she's all angry about this email, and I get it, but it's not like an email can't be hacked. Like it's not like ouch a secret. Like so it's not like it's difficult for somebody else to sign an email under somebody's name. So like not giving her sister like a chance to explain it, that sort of annoyed me. But she probably did not deserve a slit throat.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have too much to say about this movie, to be honest. I mean, it's enjoyable, but only to a point. But it is written and directed. Well, I think it was written and directed by Lee Whannell, my homeboy. But yeah, if he's out there listening, he needs to hit me up. I got this great movie idea called Cyborg G. It's a cyborg orgy. So just
Yes, because after Insidious and Invisible Man, that's going to be his next project.
Hit me up. We'll do lunch.
Yes. So I think there's a lot of decent scenes in the movie. I like the whole the attic sequence where she goes up to the attic and then hears some noises and drops some paint down, and then boom, we see this guy. It's effective. It's not like it's necessarily surprising. But it's well done.
How'd he get the paint off his suit?
Yeah. And speaking of which, I do like how toward the end, during the whole Armando Institution escape scene, she damages the suit sufficiently enough that it's sort of like flickering in and out, which is sort of cool looking. But I don't know. It's like one of the things. I thought the scene was decent, but I wasn't blown away by it. I did like the black cop. I thought he was a pretty good character. I mean, letting this one woman stay at your place, who I'm not sure how well they knew each other. I'm not like, it seems like the cop is more friends with the sister of the main character than the main character herself. But he was a pretty nice guy. I mean, it helps though that this woman who's now rich is going to give your daughter a bunch of money to go to college. So well done. Speaking of which, if I got that much money, that would be a great experience. So if you're like a billionaire, hit me up. We can do lunch. I'm a pretty nice guy. So yeah, I think the movie's decent. I'm not sure if it's like the best horror movie of 2020, but to be fair, I've not seen like a whole lot from last year. But I can obviously, this came out just before the COVID thing hit, like Chucky said. So it's probably one of the most viewed horror movies of 2020. So I see why it's a decent movie. I just don't think it's great. And if you want to see this toy trimmed down a bit with a lot more classic imagery, you should watch the 1933 original movie. So
I have a feeling I won't enjoy that.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think I gave the original like a 9 out of 10, but this one, I think it's a decent movie. It's just not great. I'm going to give this a 7.5, which is just above average. I'm going to round that down to a 7 out of 10. I think it's okay, but it's not like much more than that.
Yeah, I think it's a decent movie. It's enjoyable, like I said, to a point. Yeah, I'm giving this a 7 out of 10. I think my main gripe is that we didn't get a scene where, like, she's sleeping and he's like, taking off her pants or anything like that. So, I mean, you're invisible. You got an opportunity to do some things like that. So.
You wanted some like blood harvest type stuff to happen.
Yeah. For reals.
Yes. We finish off with A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors. In which case, there's a troubled teen who is having these dreams that are bothering her. She gets attacked by Friday. It looks like a suicide attempt, so she's sent to a sleep deprivation institute. Then there's other teens who are having the same issues with Friday. And then Nancy returns, and she wasn't in the second movie, so she comes back in this one. And she tries to help the kids with somewhat unconventional means. They have to find some dream powers to try to fight Friday off before they're killed off one by one. And there's also another doctor who meets a mysterious nun who seems to know more about Friday than any living person could. Yeah, Dream Warriors is, for a long time, it's been my favorite Nightmare on Elm Street sequel. I think it does a lot of things right. I think it's a really fun movie. And it's not perfect. The original is definitely better. This one has sometimes a bit of a strong fantasy feel, without the dream powers. Some of them are sort of ridiculous, but it's a really I do find it a really fun movie, and it's not a movie that I have that many complaints about. So I'm sort of curious. I'm not sure really what you think about this one. So what are your opinions?
This is actually, to be honest, I don't watch the Nightmare on Elm Street sequels a whole lot. Like, I've probably seen part 3 maybe 3 times in my life, maybe. I, I don't know. But, and that's pretty much goes the same for most of the sequels. I mean, if you go back to our our review of the original movie, you'd know that, that's one of those movies I saw when I was quite young. And, I found Freddy really scary in that movie, as a lot of kids would when they first see that movie back in the day. So that same feeling from that movie is not here with any of the sequels, to be honest. Maybe a little bit in part 2, but we know part 2's got its own issues. And yeah, I just found like that same feeling's not here with this one. And I know a lot of people actually out there, they swear by this movie. It's like the best sequel at the very least. They make that claim.
I mean, there's really no competition.
Well,
So,
I guess depends who you ask. To me, I don't have a problem with watching part 4 over this one. I'm not saying part 4 is better, but I'm just saying I don't feel like there's much of a difference between them. In terms of how much I enjoy them. To be honest, I haven't seen part 5 in a long time, and I know that's one that people gripe a bit about. I have seen part 6 quite a few times. Yeah, that one's not that great, but it's certainly not as good as part 3 or 4 from what I remember. But
and the it's not as bad as part 5. So
yeah.
there you go.
But anyways, like I don't think there's a sequel to Nightmare on Elm Street that I would rate probably more than a 7.
I think New Nightmare is probably deserving of at least a 7.5.
Yeah, New Nightmares might be. I know it's probably the most interesting idea from all the sequels, just because it tries to do something a bit different. And actually, New Nightmare, I won't talk much about that because we'll give it its own review at some point, but I think that's the one movie where I actually started to find Freddy a little more scary again. But in any case, this movie, part 3, like you said, I think a part of the reason why this doesn't quite take it over the top for me is the superpowers in the dreams. I think that was just a stupid addition to this movie. It just makes it too campy. A guy turns into Harry Potter, basically. Yeah.
I don't know. Like for me, I want to make it a bit cheesy, but I guess maybe because I saw this one when I was younger. I mean, maybe you did too. It never really bothered me. Like the whole. I mean, if you're going to be having a situation where you can pull other people into your dreams, you might as well give them powers. I mean, why not? And it's not like for half of the time it even mattered. Like the only power that was even all that significant, I guess you could say Kincaid's strength helped them climb down at the end, but it was guys shouting that broke the mirrors, which is useful, which is I don't know, not much of a power. But I guess even though this went a bit goofier with Freddy's personality than the previous movies, it's still I still think it's more of a fun goofy as opposed to like a really ridiculous goofy like you get in movies 4 and 5, which I mean 4 is not like a terrible movie, but some of the Freddy scenes in number 4 just sort of cringy. I mean this one you get the classic "Welcome to Primetime, Bitch," which is I mean who doesn't like this scene? Or maybe you don't like it, but I think it's a pretty good scene.
Yeah, I mean it's fine. It's just I just don't. Yeah, I just don't feel like there's really much in this movie that's all that much better than in part 4 or 2 or yeah.
Well, I'd say, and that's another thing I actually want to mention. I rate this quite a bit higher than part 4, mainly because I think it's really fun to have Nancy come back, and even though John Saxon may not have done that much in this movie, I did like seeing John Saxon come back. I thought it was sort of interesting seeing that he's just like a down and out guy at a bar, and that's where his life has come to, since the events of the first movie. So I think the sort of continuity it has helps a little, even if you don't necessarily like where it takes the characters.
Yeah, sort of unlikable, at least from my perspective. Who wanted to see her dad turn into that douche?
Well, it's not like he wasn't a bit of a dig in the original movie. I mean, like, I mean, sure he has his reasons, but like refusing to even listen to his daughter, like some of the, I don't know, like it's not like he was perfect back then. He was better than the mother, only because he wasn't like a drunk who pit bars on her windows. But um, two other things I wanted to mention. I'm sorry, three other things I wanted to mention. One, I think the opening to this movie is pretty fantastic. We have the main character making a paper mache house. Then she has sort of a creepy dream sequence. And if there's any point in this movie where Friday seems a little bit more threatening, I think it would probably be this opening dream. He sort of chases her around a bit. It's nothing like amazing or anything you haven't seen before, but I think it's a pretty good opening. Two, I think the marionette kill with Friday sort of controls this kid with the ligaments torn from his arms and legs. It doesn't always look great, but I think it looks cool enough. It's original, and that scene where he's like his face is in the sky and cuts the ligaments, I think it's a pretty quality scene. And lastly, the Dream Warrior song. Even though I know that the band doesn't even like playing it, I think it's a pretty fun song. And it's probably one of the better made for movies horror themes out there, so I can dig it.
To be honest, I've never been a fan of. I've never really gotten into having, at least in the 80s, having metal music in horror movies. It just, there's something about it just doesn't hit with me. I mean, there's movies later on, in the 2000s and stuff, which can play heavy music in a horror movie and it's fine. Yeah, in the 80s didn't do too much for me, whether it's Nightmare on Elm Street or Hellraiser. I mean, the songs themselves, yeah, they're okay. I mean, I wouldn't go out of my way to listen to them, but I don't know. I guess maybe it's more the 80s metal is not really exactly my preferred music.
Well, at the very least, it's better than Madwin.
I don't think so.
So, there is actually one other thing I wanted to mention. I'm just trying to think of anything else I want to hit on. This sort of like an origin story given for Friday. I guess a little deeper origin than what we got in the first movie. From the aforementioned mysterious nun, who communicates with one of the characters. And I think it's pretty decent. I feel like the whole thing feels sometimes maybe a little out of place. Like, oh, this mysterious woman's randomly telling this guy, like, about how Friday was born. Like, I'm not sure if it really matters that much. But I did like the junkyard scene, and even though it looks sort of corny nowadays, I did like the skeleton. I thought it was fine. That roaring was a bit ridiculous, but I sort of like it. And a lot of this, again, it might have to do more with the fact that I've seen this movie quite a few times. I'll just throw the number, like maybe 5, 6, 7 times. It's a movie I always enjoy watching. So there's certainly a bit maybe nostalgic value to it. But I think there's a lot of decent things here. So that's probably where a lot of my feelings are coming from.
I think the other thing with Freddy is that I prefer Freddy just to be himself rather than turn into all these like monsterish versions of whatever. And
I've seen it like the snake.
I mean it's fine. I mean it's I just think Freddy himself is more interesting than that. I mean we get to see a lot more of him in the original movie just as himself. Like he's not out there turning into these snakes or monsters, whatever. And it's just, I just don't like it going in that campy direction, I guess.
Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't really fix itself into like New Nightmare. I think actually the 6th movie is enjoyable in its own way, but let me talk about again a very campy movie. But I don't know, this one, I'll just go ahead and rate it. I personally find it a pretty enjoyable movie. I always have, and I probably always will. I never have a bad time with it. even if it's a bit corny. Um, I don't know. I'm cool with it. So I'm going to give this one an 8.5, which is quite a bit above average. And just to just because I'm an extremist, I'm going to move this up to a 9 out of 10. I thoroughly enjoyed, and it's it's easily, in my opinion, the best sequel to the first movie, and even if you count New Nightmare and other related movies, I don't think anything comes that close. So a 9 out of 10 might be a bit high, but I'm going to stick with it.
And it's enjoyable. It's got Freddy in it, so there's things to have fun with. But for me personally, yeah, I'm just one of those guys in this particular series. The original, nothing comes close to it. While the sequels are watchable, they're fun to a point. Yeah, it just, I don't know. Anyways, I'm giving this a 7 out of 10. I almost want to bump it up a little bit just because of the nurse scene, because I'd enjoy being her patient. But yeah, I think with horror movie sequels, especially for these bigger franchises, what filmmakers need to do, at least moving forward from this point in time, if you really want to know how to make a really good sequel, what you need to do, you need to gather up the best scientists and whatever people you can find. You need to have them go out and buy a copy of Child's Play 2, DVD, Blu-ray, whatever. Take it back to your lab and pick that movie apart, because that is the quintessential, most beautiful sequel in horror movie history. Am I right?
I don't have a list in front of me, but yeah, it's a very solid sequel.
Get the fuck out.
I mean, hey, I gave it almost the same rating as the first movie. I think both are fantastic, so I'll disagree with you.
Let's have a little discussion about movie expectations and how they can affect your enjoyment of a movie, I guess. It's something that I think about quite a lot more now. Like, this is something that never crossed my mind growing up. And I think I touched on that when we were talking about RoboCop 2. Like, it's just like almost everything I watched was some form of good. Like, I was just watching all these random 80s horror movies. You go to the video store, you just see something on the shelf. Oh, this looks cool, I'll watch it. Now, obviously, they're not all 10 out of 10s, but there's not a lot of movies that I would have watched back then that I was like 2 out of 10, And a part of that's probably that I just had no expectations, or I don't know. But I mean, to this, you fast forward 20 something years or whatever to where I am now, and I'm finding quite often that I need to watch a movie like 2 or 3 times before I truly know what I think of it. There's movies that I watch. I mean, you look at the Child's Play remake from 2019. I gave it a 9 out of 10. After watching a couple more times, I'll probably drop it down to an 8. I don't have a list of examples. I probably should have done that, but well, here's another one. One of your favorites, Triloquist.
Oh boy.
Now, that's a movie that I first watched and I was like, this is kind of boring or not interesting to me. Because I got that movie for free from the studio back when it came out. And then the second time, I decided to give it another watch. I don't know how many years later, but so many years later. And I actually had an okay time with it. Then I watched again, I enjoyed it even more. And, it's a movie that grew on me. And I think part of that is because, the marketing and everything made me think it was going to be like a Chucky movie. And it's certainly nothing like a Chucky movie. And I think, obviously, the expectation there was, I'm going to get this. And instead I got that. And yeah, I'm finding that to this day, just, it really impacts my view or my enjoyment of a movie, really. And to be honest, I think it does to most people. You know, you get a movie that's all hyped up, and then people call it shit just because it wasn't a 10 out of 10. I mean, so, sometimes an 8 out of 10 movie is just an 8 out of 10 movie. I mean, that doesn't make it bad. But I see. What was it? Bloody disgusting. They gave the latest Rambo movie a 1.5 out of 5. I'm like, I get that, you know, compared to the others, you might not have thought it was as good, but I mean, people writing for a horror website, I mean, if you're gonna call this a 1.5, you haven't watched a lot of garbage that's out there. I mean, seriously. Anyways, I've talked a lot about it. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I often say that I try not to go into movies nowadays with expectations, but and sometimes like if I don't know much about a movie, like the dinner party, I didn't go in with too many expectations, and even though I didn't, it still sucked as a movie, but but there's some movies I can't help but go in with, I'll say first with negative perception, like the whole reason I avoided watching Seed of Chucky for the longest time. I mean, I'd seen all the other Child's Play movies and Bride of Chucky multiple times, but I never watched Seed of Chucky until, and I've only seen it one time, by the way. And the reason I never watched it was because just based on the plot, I knew I probably wasn't going to like it. And I feel like even if I didn't have those expectations, I sort of hated it. But I had such a negative feeling toward it without even seeing it. And of course, when I watched it, I gave it a 2 out of 10 because the movie sucks. But and it's the same thing too with another movie I gave a pretty low rating to, The Greasy Strangler, because I'd seen the trailer maybe, or I'd seen this scene or something. I knew a little bit about it, but I didn't know how bad it was going to be. But I just didn't sound like my type of movie, so I was really hesitant. Well, I'll just say I don't go out of my way to watch movies I don't think I'll enjoy. Um, I mean, I watch any horror movie, but I don't like giving movies like bad ratings. It's not something I set out to do. So if I feel like I'm not going to like a movie, I try to avoid it. But sometimes it may not be a choice. And I watched Greasy Strangler, gave it like a 1 out of 10. Well, actually, personally, I gave it a 0 out of 10, but I can only do so much. So, um, certainly expectations come into that. But I guess for me, it's almost like an unavoidable thing. If you can avoid expectations going into movies, more power to you. Um, I think it'd be nice if more people call, but at the same time, I know a lot of times, like when I'm watching a movie, I can I can really stop myself from thinking, I'm hoping it's like this. And one really random example that a lot of people aren't going to even know, there's a movie, I think it's from 1965. It's called Two on the Guillotine, which is a movie that it's been on, like, I have a want to see list for horror movies, and it's been on my list for like 9, 10, 11 years. Like I've known about the movie for like so long, but I just only saw it this last year. And what I had seen was so different from what I had expected it to be. And I thought this, I still thought it was a pretty good movie. It wasn't like a negative experience. Um, but like at first I was sort of thrown off, like, this isn't what I was thinking at all. Um, so it's probably, I don't know. Ideally, it would be best to try to, if possible, avoid expecting, one way or the other. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of that's sort of outside of our power. Like we can't help what we think.
Mm, yeah. Well, another example, the Grudge remake. Well, the remake. It's like the second remake. But yeah, that movie got trashed so much when it came out. Like it probably barely had a 3 out of 10 on IMDb, or 3 point something. And I ended up seeing that movie at the theaters, but it was like weeks after it came out because, I just wanted to go see something, anything at the time because I guess there wasn't much else out. But so obviously I went into that movie expecting one of the worst movies that I'd ever see in the theater. I ended up giving it like 6 out of 10. Now, granted, I've only seen it once, so maybe because I had such low expectations, I ended up I didn't enjoy it, but I didn't feel it was that bad. But now, given that I've seen it, and I'm next time I revisit, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to be seeing a 6 out of 10 movie because that's what I gave it last time. Suddenly now my expectations is it's not going to be bad. So the next time I watch it, I might go, actually, what the hell was I thinking? 4 out of 10. Who knows? It seems to happen, and I guess that's the power of expectation, isn't it?
Well, and actually, somewhat similar. So like, I've never seen the 2019 Black Christmas movie, but I know that it gets trashed pretty much everywhere. I have seen a few people like it, but part of me wonders is if they actually like it, or if they like it just because everybody else hates it, which may not be fair. Because like I said, I've not seen it. I have no idea if it's good or not. I might actually have an okay time with it. I mean, let's just say my tastes in horror can sometimes be a bit strange. Um, I hate The Shining, but so I feel like if I had a chance, for instance, to watch a random horror movie from 2019 or Black Christmas from 2019, I'd probably go with a random horror movie, if only because at least I don't have any like preconceived negative perceptions about it, which sort of sucks because like I said, maybe Black Christmas is a movie I would actually enjoy, but because of all the negativity surrounding it, um, it's not something I want to go out of my way to experience. Because if it is as bad as so many people say it is, well then I just wasted time watching a movie that other people already hated. So like, it just didn't do much for me. So I don't know. It's unfortunate because it's not like you can. It's not like you can. I like unless you live in like some type of under a rock, you can't like stop hearing what people are saying. Um, Another quick example. For It Chapter 2, which came out a couple of years ago, after the 2017 It Chapter 1, I was expecting, this to still be pretty okay. But I saw it in theaters, and to this day, it's actually the only time I've seen that movie. I'm not sure if maybe you've seen it again a few times since then, but I've only seen that movie once at this point, and it felt like a really, in a way, massy, average movie. And I'm sort of wondering if going into it next time I see it, if I'm going to have like maybe a better time with it because I know more of what I'm getting into. So yeah, it's a hard thing to control, um, but it's something at least you should probably be aware of when you're like a big movie
Yeah.
fan.
Well, I'm glad you brought up it. The new It, um, chapter 1 and 2. I still haven't watched chapter 2 outside of my one theater viewing, but I have seen chapter 1, or the first chapter, because it's not technically called It Chapter 1, but I have seen that one quite a few times. And for anyone who knows me, outside of Child's Play, the 1990 version, is my second all-time favorite horror movie. I technically it's a mini-series, but we'll just call it a movie. And so clearly, I was excited to see a remake of this, and everyone's getting hyped up about it. So you going in going, oh boy, oh boy. And the fact that I actually came out of the movie giving it a 10 out of 10 pretty much solidifies that, at least for me, how good that movie was. Now the second one, yeah, that one's a bit of a mess. I'd have to rewatch it and see what I think. I gave it an 8 out of 10 for chapter 2, but I have a feeling, I don't know, maybe it even drops to a 7. I don't know. It's got Pennywise in it, so that's enough to maybe save it.
And not only does it have Pennywise, it has a bad version of Pennywise.
What, you over Tim Curry?
Yes.
I wouldn't say better.
Yeah,
I'd just say different. But they're both good.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite expectation?
What's my favorite expectation? My favorite expectation is how many titties am I gonna see?
Actually, that's a good point too. Because I recently watched I think it was Friday the 13th part
28.
6.
Okay.
At 6, I can't think. Jason Lives, that's what it was. Jason Lives, Friday the 13th part 6, which is actually somewhat well known for being the only Friday the 13th movie without any nudity.
I'm very disgusted by the fact that they put no nudity in that.
Well, see, it's funny because I just assumed I Friday the 13th movie, and I hadn't seen it for so long, so I just assumed there was nudity in it somewhere. And when like Nan popped up, and there's some decently attractive women in the movie, when Nan popped up, I'm like, the fuck is this? It's like there's certain, like, when it comes to like slasher movies from the 80s, because we're both big slasher fans. There's certain things I look for in slasher movies that sort of just make it a little bit more enjoyable. And I feel like it's not too immature comment to say, like, nudity is a nice addition. It can be overdone sometimes, to like almost parodying a parodied amount, but there's nothing wrong with, like, I mean, because believe it or not, people sometimes get naked in life. So, and when it's some of the more attractive women doing it, I mean, who can have a problem with that? So sometimes when you're watching, like, especially with me when I'm watching like an 80s slasher, I just assume that's gonna be come up somewhere, and a lot of times it does. It's not like I would ever rate a movie poorly because it doesn't show up, but it is certainly one of the things where you sort of, I don't know, it doesn't make like a giant impact on the story, but you also sort of wish they had it.
Even if it was Jason getting naked, I'd take that.
I mean, hey, you take what you can get. So that's, yes.
I mean, he's got the tool belt on, so he's got that extra layer of clothing to remove in like a striptease or something. Slowly take off the tool belt, and or leave the tool belt on and take everything else off. There you go. That's special.
Indeed.
It's getting jiggy, all hot.
Yes.